There's a kind of strength that isn't chosen, but more so forced. It's not the empowering kind, not the kind you step into with courage. This is the kind of strength that you wear kind of like a straight jacket. Because the alternative, crumbling, sobbing, asking for help, it never felt like it was allowed. It's the strength of the dependable one, the one who's composed, the high achieving one, the one who learned early that the only way to be loved was to never be too much. And so we survive by suppressing, by over-functioning. We get really, really good at holding it all together. We become exceptional in school, in work, in relationships. We give more than we really have, and we smile when we're tired. We nod when we want to scream. We apologize for our needs, and we excel in environments that praise productivity and emotional control. And no one suspects a thing. They call us strong. But behind this composure is a silent pain, a pain that whispers, I don't want to be strong anymore. I just want to be safe enough to be real. So many of us live decades, I think, without ever knowing that kind of safety. Emotional safety isn't just about being around kind people. It's about being with people who can handle your unraveling without needing to fix it, judge it, or recoil from it. People who don't just admire your strength, but who also make room for your softness as well. And the tragedy is, we often learn to be strong because the people around us were not strong. Maybe you were the child who saw your parents overwhelmed emotionally. They were immature or burdened or volatile, and you realized you had to be the calm one. You had to be the rational one, the helper, the one who got praised for being mature beyond your years. But what you really were was you were emotionally abandoned. Or maybe you were the student who didn't quite fit in, who turned instead to perfectionism because at least if you were successful, you couldn't be ignored. At least if you were excellent, then you'd be worth keeping. Or maybe you were the one whose grief made others uncomfortable and whose questions were dismissed, whose emotions were too intense or dramatic. And so you shrunk them, you compressed them, you tucked them away beneath humor or hard work or smiles that were hollow. And in time, the only version of you that felt welcome was the version that wasn't falling apart. And so here we are now. You're grown up, you're accomplished maybe, you're admired even, and yet something in us still aches to be held in our mess, not for what we produce, not for how well we perform, but simply for being human. I've known this feeling far too well. See, in my faith community that I grew up in, I was a poster boy child. I was polished, I was principled, I was respectable. I was celebrated for the character and admired for my composure that I had. But when I unexpectedly stumbled into the world of porn, more out of curiosity than rebellion, I felt this shame that was so deep that I couldn't name it. I wasn't really afraid of the consequences as much as I was terrified of not having anyone safe to help me make sense of what I was feeling and experiencing. I wanted desperately to fall apart in the presence of someone who was steady, someone who wouldn't panic, someone who could sit with me in the questions without reducing me to a category or a cautionary tale. But that person didn't exist for me. And so I carried it alone. And in that isolation, I performed for years, for decades. I performed morality, I performed emotional regulation, I performed confidence. But really, I was terrified that if anyone really saw me, not the image or the output that I put out, but who saw the real me, they would surely walk away. Because I didn't feel lovable in my rawness. I only felt lovable in my performance. And it wasn't until much later, through tremendous loss and collapse and through this quiet hell of emotional exhaustion that I began to realize this. The performance wasn't strength. It was more of a trauma response. And that realization broke me open in the best way. And it's also why this work here, like what I do here at Uber Bintegers, matters so deeply to me. I'm not just trying to give people answers. I'm trying to be what I never had, which was a safe place for people to explore the parts of themselves that they're still scared to show. It's a place where falling apart isn't failure. It's more the beginning of integrity. Because to live with integrity, as I've come to understand it at least, it means to bring the inside and the outside into alignment. And to live with intimacy, that into me you see kind of life, it requires being seen in our undoing and not just our achieving. See, most people don't know how to create space for that, but even fewer know how to ask for it. We've been conditioned to think that emotional breakdown is a sign of weakness, and that composure equals maturity, and that vulnerability is something to be earned, not something to be honored on arrival. But the truth is, breakdown is often the only way to break through. See, when we deny ourselves the freedom to fall apart, we don't just become stronger, we just become lonelier. And the more we're praised for holding it all together, the harder it becomes to let anyone see what we're really not doing okay with. There's something cruel about the way we applaud resilience while ignoring the wounds that it hides. We love stories of perseverance. We quote them, we post them, we tell each other, look how far you've come. But rarely do we ask, what did it cost you to survive like this? We romanticize survival and forget to grieve the toll that it takes on our soul to never feel safe enough to stop surviving. See, that's the hidden grief that's beneath so many high-functioning people. We look okay, we show up, we keep our word, we support others, we lead well, we're strong, but no one sees what it took for us to keep showing up like that. No one sees our capacity that was forged in the fires that never should have been walked through alone. And here's where the real heartbreak lives. When you've spent a lifetime holding it all together, you often don't even know how to fall apart safely anymore. You long for it. You feel it deep in your bones, the pain to finally let go, to stop pretending, to say what's real, to cry hard. But then something inside of you freezes and you tighten up and you swallow your tears and you laugh it off and say, I'm fine. And you distract and you disappear and you soldier on because somewhere deep down, you don't believe the people around you would stay if you truly let it go. And maybe you're right. Maybe they wouldn't. See, some people know how to love the strongest version of us, the one that's curated, the one that's reliable, the one that's resilient. And so we stay in character, not because we want to be fake, but because we're scared of being abandoned. And that fear is real. And that fear is ancient. For some of us, it started in childhood while our parents punished our tears or our spiritual leaders dismissed our doubts. For others, it may have been teachers who rewarded compliance over curiosity, or partners who drew close only when we were upbeat, but not when we were unraveling. And so we learned to compartmentalize. We learned to separate our pain from our presence. And we developed personas, right? That were helpful and composed and charming and accomplished because those personas protected us. They made us palatable. They earned us connection. But they also robbed us of intimacy. Because intimacy doesn't come from being impressive. Intimacy comes from being honest. It comes from those moments where you say, I'm not okay. And then someone stays. not with advice, not with solutions. They just stay with their presence, with stillness, with their breath, with this unflinching presence that says, you don't scare me. You don't burden me. You don't need to shrink here. Most of us don't get that kind of a moment. And so we learn to live without it. But living without it costs us everything. It costs us connection. It costs us self-trust. It costs us clarity. Because when you're always performing strength, you eventually forget what your real needs are. You become so good at accommodating others that you forget what it's like to be known. Not just needed, not just admired, but seen. I know what it's like to carry that ache. I know the heartbreak of being the person that others come to with their pain, but not knowing where to take your own. I know the exhaustion of being emotionally responsible for everyone else's needs while quietly burying my own. And what I've learned is this: if we don't find safe spaces to fall apart, eventually we'll implode in unsafe ones. See, that's what breakdowns are. That's what sudden withdrawals and ghosting and burnout and explosive arguments really are. They're the body and the heart saying, I can't keep pretending that I'm fine. And they're ruptures that were born before repression. That's why in this work that I do here at Bintegers, the aim is never just emotional literacy. It's creating a sacred space for people to disarm, to exhale, to feel safe enough to be a mess, because healing doesn't start when we get answers. It starts when we feel safe enough to ask the real questions. And safety, like true emotional safety, is not about perfection. It's not about being immune to the triggers. It's more about being present. It's about someone staying with you while your world is shaking, without rushing in to try and fix it or run from it. See, I've had the honor of witnessing this kind of safety in others, both those that are my friends and in these late night phone calls where someone whispers something that they've never said out loud before, and they're not met with panic. They're met with presence. That's intimacy. That's healing. That's what rewrites our nervous system and restores our soul. So if you've never had that, if no one's ever stayed long enough while your walls are falling apart, let me say this as clearly as I can. You're not too much. Your tears are not too much. Your doubts are not too dangerous. Your fear is not too ugly. Your longing to fall apart is not a weakness. It is wisdom. It's the most human thing about you. And I know it's scary. I know it feels vulnerable. I know that it feels like it'll cost you the approval of those who only love the version of you that never struggles. But what you gain is the real you. The you who doesn't have to prove anything. The you who can actually breathe. The you who can cry. The you who doesn't need to edit your soul to be accepted. Sometimes the loneliest place in the world is not being alone. It's actually being surrounded by people who only like the version of you that keeps it all together. That's a different kind of isolation. One where the external noise never touches your internal whirlwind. One where your competence really becomes your prison. Because the more people admire you, the harder it is to tell them that you're drowning. See, you start to fear the impact of your truth, and you wonder, will they think less of me? Will they walk away? Will they say that I'm too much? Will they use this against me? So instead, you keep that mask on, and you keep playing that role, and you keep showing up in your helpful, cheerful, insightful way, even when what you need is just to be held, not needed. You need to be listened to and cared for. And the grief compounds, because now you're not just carrying your pain, you're also carrying the weight of of the unbreakable. See, that's the weight that I lived under for so many years. As a man, like when I was raised in that faith-based community, I was praised for my morality, my discipline, my outward strength. I learned that confessions were dangerous and that honesty would cost me my reputation. So I smiled, I served, I became the model young man. People pointed to me as someone that they wanted to aspire to, while internally I was imploding. And the shame that I carried, especially around the things that I couldn't speak of, like my early exposure to pornography and the questions that brought up, and I had nowhere safe to land those questions. It impacted me. I buried it, I rationalized it, I overperformed, and in that performance, I basically disappeared over time. I became someone that everyone else could count on except myself. See, I didn't know how to trust me. I didn't know how to love the parts of myself that I'd trained so hard to hide. And so I kept running into roles, running into accolades, running into relationships. But the pain never left, because the pain was never about success. It was about safety. Safety to be me, like in a full way. The version that may have made others uncomfortable, the real version of me. And here's the truth I wished I'd heard earlier. We can only heal our environments where we feel safe enough to be real. Not impressive, not wise, not virtuous, just real. And safety does not mean the absence of discomfort. It means the presence of care. It means people around you who know how to hold space for your confusion without trying to correct it. They know how to sit with you in your grief without trying to silence it. They know how to witness your weakness without weaponizing it against you. Those people exist. But you don't find them by pretending that you don't need them. See, you find them when you stop performing, when you risk honesty, when you name what's real, and when you stop filtering your humanity so that you can be more palatable. And yes, there will be people in your circles who leave. Some people only know how to relate to you when you're useful, when you're composed, when you're predictable, when you make them feel good about themselves. Your honesty might make them uncomfortable, and your sadness might definitely confuse them, and your vulnerability may scare them. So I would say learn to let them go, because you cannot become whole while you're being surrounded by people who only love your fragments. The cost of pretending is far too high. It costs your peace. It costs you your presence. It costs you yourself. And here's the miracle. Every time you choose truth over performance, even in small ways, you're reclaiming pieces of your soul and you're becoming more rooted and more alive, more you. And the right people, the ones who are safe and who are honest and emotionally present, they recognize that truth in you and they'll honor it. They won't fear it, they'll honor it. This is what we're building towards in this next series I have coming, a whole new exploration into the ways that our virtues can subtly become vices when we use them to hide instead of to heal. That's what too much of a good thing when virtue becomes vice is really all about. So that's coming next month. But we're diving into how these traits like kindness and discipline and loyalty and perseverance, all good things, can become masks that we wear when we're afraid to be seen as messy or needy or contradictory. It's going to be brutally honest and a deep dive that you don't want to miss. And for those of you who've resonated deeply with our earlier episode that we did on ghosting just a couple of days back, you're not alone. See, that episode has drawn the most response from our entire series this month. So that's why I've decided to release a special deep dive. It's going to be for free, a course on my website at Bintegers, And it's a course that's designed not just to explain why ghosting happens, but to help heal the part of us that either ghosts or has been ghosted, so that we can move forward with clarity and integrity and intimacy. Because that's what this is about. Like every episode, every story that I share, every course, it's a bridge back to ourselves and to each other. And that includes you, the parts that you're tired of holding together, right? The parts that long to fall apart but don't really know how. The parts of you that are so used to being okay that you've forgotten how to say, I'm not okay. See, you're allowed to be human here. You don't have to earn belonging with performance. You don't have to apologize for your needs. You don't have to minimize your longings. You get to be all of you. Even the parts that tremble, even the parts that ache, the parts that are feeling like they're unfinished. Sometimes the cost of finally being honest is watching the world you built with performance begin to crumble. That's not failure, that's freedom. Because a life built on hiding is really unstable. It's cracking beneath the weight of suppression. And when it finally breaks, that rupture is sacred. It's the sound of your soul refusing to be buried any longer. But here's the paradox. Many of us don't fear falling apart. What we really fear, I think, is being alone. We fear that if we show our struggle, we'll be left behind. We fear that our honesty will be met with pity and not with presence. We fear that our burdens are going to be too weighty for others. These fears have roots. Many of us were conditioned to believe that love had prerequisites and that approval was earned and that we had to keep the things tidy to be taken seriously. And that vulnerability was really a weakness and that being too much was something to apologize for. So we got really good at being palatable and lonely. See, this is why people matter so much. Safe people don't rescue you from your breakdown. What they do is they remain present within it. They don't give advice before they give affection. They don't panic at your pain. They trust your ability to feel without falling apart permanently. They make room for the mess because they've made room for their own mess. These are the people who make falling apart less terrifying. Not because they fix anything, but because they stay. And maybe the most heartbreaking part of all this is that when we spent our lives surrounded by people who needed us to be fine, we started to believe that no one really wanted the real us. We started to internalize the idea that messy, tender, complicated parts of ourselves are really liabilities, rather than gifts that invite real connection. But what if the opposite is truth? What if the parts of you that tremble are actually the parts that make others feel less alone? What if your honesty gives others permission to stop performing? What if your unraveling is what finally allows your heart to breathe? See, we think we'll be rejected for being real, but the people who matter, the ones who are worth keeping, they're usually the ones who we go to first, to say the hard thing, to admit a truth, to laugh without pretense, to cry in the open, to speak without curating it. That's what intimacy is. Not proximity, not time spent together, not how much you know about someone else's resume. Intimacy, I love describing as into me see. It's a sacred act of allowing yourself to be known, especially in the places that you've hidden the most. But we can't experience intimacy if we're still trying to maintain the image of being fine. That's why so many high-functioning people are feeling starved for love. They're admired, they're respected, they're trusted, but they're not known. And being truly known requires risk. It requires telling the truth when your voice is really shaking. It requires choosing connection over control. It requires letting go of the story that you've told about yourself being unlovable. That's terrifying until it's not. Because when you're finally seen and still loved, that's when the healing begins. And this is why the work that I'm doing here at Uber Bintegers matters so much to me. Because I know how costly it is to live a life where my inner world was screaming while my outer world was applauded. I've been there. I've been stuck in the version of myself that others celebrated, but that I couldn't really live inside anymore. And I know what it feels like to finally risk honesty and then watch everything that I thought was secure fall apart. But what's rebuilt in that rawness is real, and it's rooted, and it's honest. And best of all, it's mine. See, you're not performing someone else's script anymore. You're actually able to live your own truth if you walk this path, even if it's messy and slow and quiet. And it's in the quiet that something powerful begins to emerge, and that's this sense or ability to trust yourself again. When you stop betraying your own truth to keep others comfortable, you begin to build an unshakable kind of confidence. Not the kind that impresses others, but the kind that anchors you. And you stop outsourcing your value to others' applause. You stop fearing your own emotions. You stop apologizing for being real. And that's where integrity meets intimacy. Not as a theory, but as a lived reality. You start showing up aligned, honest, human, and in that space, others begin to feel the same safety to emulate you. Not by being perfect, but by being present. Present with yourself and others. Present with each other. Present with the stories where pain can be expressed. So if you're tired of being the strong one, the composed one, the one who never breaks, you're not weak. You're just overdue for some softness and safety and in a place where you don't have to be anything else but you're yourself. That's what we're building here. And as this series wraps up in the next couple of days, I want to remind you again, next month's series is going to take this even further. In Too Much of a Good Thing, when virtue becomes a vice, I'll be exploring what happens when our strengths become our shield, and how to reclaim the parts of us that have been hidden behind performance in the name of goodness. It's going to be bold and nuanced and deeply, deeply liberating. And if the topic of ghosting hit home for you, whether you've ghosted or been ghosted, or if you're just trying to make sense of what's happening in your relational world, I'm creating something special. It's a free deep dive course on ghosting available on my website. And it's a resource that I've poured a lot of my heart into. Because ghosting isn't just about disappearing, right? It's about disconnection. And we're here to bridge that gap, aren't we? So you don't have to go it alone. You don't have to keep holding it together. You don't have to keep waiting for permission to fall apart. You are already worthy of being seen, even in the places that you feel unseen. So come a little closer, won't you? Or stay a bit longer. Let yourself be human here in this space as you listen through these episodes. I appreciate you listening in. Let me know how this landed for you in the comments.